All right, everyone, it is that time. So welcome to the October 2020 virtual Rocky Mountain Railroad Club meeting. I'm sort of the host, Nathan Holmes, and at this point, our presenter tonight is going to be Frank Keller with a large number of his excellent photography of the Alaska Railroad, along with some additional material, probably Rio Grande, although Frank in the trial run just said he's going to surprise us. So we'll see what goodies he's dug out of his photographic history, but you'll be impressed. Trust me. He's an excellent photographer, and his work on the Alaska is second to none. So we'll get to Frank in a minute, but first I will turn it over to our President Denny and Vice President Dave for news and announcements.
Good evening, everyone. It's getting dark early, so it is 7:30 daylight time, I guess, and nice to be here for another Zoom meeting, although I was hoping maybe by now we'd be face-to-face, but it looks like now through the end of the year we're going to kind of be that on this Zoom issue. So anyway, appreciate everybody that is attending. The YouTube stream, I think, is also working, so we believe we probably got a number of other folks on the YouTube connection for this presentation tonight, which we're looking forward to. The only thing I really have is that there's a little bit of fall left, and if you can get out, take advantage of it. The aspens are neat, and I just was over Rawlins and Pass, so there's still some cool stuff to do. And I do want to make a note that we will have elections coming up in the December meeting. So Andy Dell is kind of heading up our nomination committee. So if you have ideas for board members and officers, we would certainly like you to send them in. We'll have some more in the next rail report on that issue. There'll be a bit of a challenge, I think, because of having to be Zoom, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be Zoom for December also, from what the church is telling us with Dave. So anyway, good to see everybody. I'm looking forward to the meeting, and Dave, take it away.
All right. Good evening, everybody. And we know that people will probably watch this on YouTube at some point farther down the road. We don't have the people and the time to edit these things right now. So if it seems a little dead time at the beginning on your YouTube view, that's kind of the way it is. We're still working on this. So anyway, welcome aboard. I will introduce Frank in a minute. Our program next month will be about, actually backing up just a little bit, our whole next newsletter is going to really revolve around the involvement with the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club and the Union Pacific Steam Program, which officially goes back about 40 years, maybe more. At this point, Jim Ehrenberger is going to write an article for us and supply us with a lot of pictures. And so to go with that, our presenter next month for November will be Ed Dickens. I spoke with him today, and you might think that he would talk about the steam engines and all, but he tells me that he's also got some updates for us as to, since there's been this downtime with the pandemic, they've been working on the tracks and the turntable, and the roundhouse hasn't been painted exterior in 30 years. So they've been doing a little bit of spiffing up around the Cheyenne shops there. So he will tell us about that. And our presenter for December will be probably Scott Lotus with the Center for Railroad Photography and Art up in Wisconsin. He has not told us exactly what his program is going to be yet, but they have a vast catalog of things to draw from. So I'm sure they'll have some good pictures for us. And also along those lines, they've been doing a few online presentations via Zoom or WebEx. And they just put out some notes today. I posted it on the Railroad Club's Facebook page, and we may have it on our web page in the next day or two. The next program they have, I believe, is on the 29th, and it will be a free show. So you just need to register for it. And I think even if you're not an actual Rocky Mountain Railroad Club member, you could probably register for that too. So probably check on that, Center for Railroad Photography and Art. If it's not on our website, you can look them up or find it on our Facebook page, that type of thing. Other news, the Cumbres and Toltec has got the Denver Rio Grande number 168, the old 10-wheeler running again. And they did a test run earlier this month with 3 of the restored pre-1900 cars, all painted in nice red and looking really nice. 3 of them, they did a test run from Antonito, I think, to somewhere near the top of Cumbres Pass, maybe just to Osier, I'm not sure, but there are some pictures of that floating around out there. Anyway, I think I've probably talked long enough, so I will introduce Frank Keller. Our picture went away for a minute there. I guess it looks like we're back. Anyway, Frank lived in Colorado for quite a while, and he currently lives in Alaska and works with the Alaska Railroad, and I will let Frank take it from there. We probably need to unmute him.
Yep, there I am. Hello from Alaska. So it's only 5:30 here roughly, and still daylight for a couple hours. So, but we're entering that time of year where it's getting cold. It's about 45 degrees today was our high. So we're starting to, we haven't had any snow yet here in Anchorage though. So we're glad about that because winter's long enough. And the longer we can stay away from the snow, the happier everybody is, especially when you throw in the darkness. So with that being said, I guess we can, I'll share my screen and see some photos. Hopefully this.
You got the right one set, I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I think our mic's still hot.
Yep. That's okay.
Get rid of that. All right, what happened here? Oh, what happened there? No, it was there and then it was gone. I got a new tab. It pulled up. Sorry about that, but I don't know what happened there. Let's try this real quick. I thought F11 was the full screen. Maybe I hit the wrong button. Yeah, maybe I hit the wrong button, but let's see here. I saw it there briefly, and then it disappeared. Oh, it's Microsoft Edge issue, it looks like. All right. All right. So in Alaska, we run freights, but not usually in the daytime. The freights between Anchorage and Fairbanks are run at night. So this was a rather late southbound freight. That is Denali in the background, standing tall there at 20,320 feet. And so it's nice to get a daytime freight, especially running into the sun in the summertime. Even though I guess it's not really summer, this is end of spring. This would be about the end of May time period. So in the summer we run gravel trains. This is a gravel train crossing the Matanuska River, about 50 miles from Anchorage. 86 car trains usually run currently in a 1-in-1. One on the head end, one on the rear is a DP unit. And they'll load on the Palmer branch and unload in South Anchorage. And on this year we ran 2 trains a day, but on busy years we can run up to 4 trains a day. And then this is the rear DP motor. And that in the background is the Gulch Mountains with Twin Peaks on the left. And you can see the road makes a right turn, and then they'll follow those mountains all the way into Anchorage. And then the same gravel train coming into town, coming into South Anchorage. This is right in town, right in South Anchorage, maybe a couple miles from my house. and they'll bring it in and unload it there before returning back to Anchorage. And this is south of Anchorage at a town called Girdwood. This is the Girdwood Valley. Again, now you're looking at the other side of the Chugach Mountains, the south side of the Chugach Mountains. And this is a freight that came off the barge from Whittier. And in fact, all railroad cars come into Alaska via one of two barges, either the barge from Seattle, the Alaska Rail Marine barge, or the CN barge, which comes out of Prince Rupert. And this train was a train off the CN barge, and usually they can hold up to 50. The CN barge is strictly rail cars, 50 cars max. The arms barge can hold 50 cars and 300 containers. This is along Turnagain Arm. Cook Inlet is where Anchorage is located, and then there's two branches of that kind of go to the north and to the south. This is Turnagain Arm. The railroad follows it for 50 miles between Anchorage and Portage, where it will divert inlet and either go to Whittier or Seattle, or I'm sorry, Seward. And this is again along Turnagain Arm. You can see it's very short trains. This tells me right away this is a CN train, all rail cars and no containers. And this is the very south end of Anchorage, where it pretty much goes away into the highway, the mountains, and the railroad tracks, and the ocean, Turnagain Arm. Winter Shot. This is a train coming up from Seward. There's also a barge comes into Seward. It does not bring rail cars, but it brings containers. In this case, it's a train of lumber. It brings in lumber and frac sand. This is a train of lumber that came up from Seward. Comes to the specialty supply, Spinard Builder Supply here in Anchorage, and they get all their lumber and such off the barge. This is further north of Anchorage at Cantwell, and that's the Talkeetna Mountains in the background. And during the wintertime, we call it the snow fleet here. So in this case, we got two Jeeps and a spreader on each end. We also run military trains. This is an empty coming back from Fort Wainwright here at Matanuska Junction. That's the main line that the train is on. To the right is the Matanuska siding, as well as the engineering track and the branch that goes to Palmer. And the distant, that's the Talkeetna Mountains. This is what I call Alaska Road's version of Heritage. We have 3 of these left in the original paint scheme, black and yellow, which I like quite a bit. In fact, I prefer this scheme to the yellow and blue, but like I said, there's just 3 of these remaining. This is the southbound Denali Star approaching Anchorage. This is actually on Elmendorf Air Force Base. So as soon as the railroad leaves Anchorage and leaves the depot, heads through Anchorage Yard, and then immediately dumps into Elmendorf Air Force Base and then Fort Richardson before it actually gets out into the what I would call the public domain, where anybody can see. That's roughly 20 miles north of Anchorage before the average person can actually get a glimpse of the Alaska Railroad. All of this requires military access. This is a train of frac sand. These are all super sacks of frac sand coming up from Japan. And this is the line that goes down to Seward. To the left in that valley there is the line that goes to Whittier. And behind the train with the frac train stretched out behind it, the line goes to Seward. And it climbs 2 grades of 3% between here and Seward itself. This is another train. This is coming off the branch from Whittier. This is one of the Whittier trains with usually this, you can always tell each barge usually will encompass 4 trains total, 2 south and 2 north. And the Jeeps will lead the train south, the first one, and unload the barge because the max are too heavy to do the barge unloading. So the max will then be the second and third train, second train south and first train north, and then the Jeeps will lead north for the last train. This is at Brookman, and this is a work train. Road requires a lot of maintenance on the south end, snow and flooding, and so we're in a work train pretty much 9-10 months out of the year. And we had a meet with the Whittier train. It's not very common to see meets on the line south, as there aren't very many places to meet. There's this siding and one other that are long enough to actually meet trains. So this is a work train meeting the Northbound Whittier off the Arms Barge. You can see the containers back there. Another view of the train exiting the Kenai Mountains in the winter. On a pretty cold day, as I recall. Train along Turnagain Arm approaching South Anchorage. Down in the background is Potter Marsh and the Chugach Mountains. And in the winter or in the summertime, it's pretty much what you'd expect. A lot of birds, a lot of moose. Pretty much see anything that Anchorage has to offer right there. Along Turnagain Arm near Indian. In the very, very far background there, you can see the Alaska Range. That comes all the way down from Fairbanks all the way down through the Aleutian Islands. And this train is actually entering Anchorage Yard, and that's again a shot of Cook Inlet and the Alaska Range in the background. That's considered Western Alaska. Anchorage is South Central Alaska. This is a train headed for Whittier with the containers. It's going to go to Seattle with all the containers. An empty lumber train headed for Seward. All the empty flats, 2 max. Take this train down to Seward where they'll load it with lumber to bring it back. And this is again Potter Marsh area. This is about milepost 100. Anchorage is milepost 114. So Anchorage is spread out quite a bit. Like where I used to live in Colorado was Colorado Springs, and kind of spread out like Colorado Springs, pretty big north to south. This is exiting Tunnel 6. This is our DMU made from Raider rail car. The only one we have, and it's not well liked. Crews don't like it, but it is what it is. And exiting a Tunnel 6 onto the bridge over the Placer River. And so this train is the Glacier Discovery. It runs between Anchorage to Whittier and then up to a place called Grandview. And all along the route there, they have places you can get off and have cabins and do hiking and see glaciers and pretty much anything you want to do. Returning Coastal Classic along Turnagain Arm late in the evening. This is probably close to 10 o'clock at night in the summertime. Still have plenty of sunshine, that low evening light. And a train exiting the forest out of the Kenai Mountains with the fireweed in the foreground. In the background there is Byron Glacier. And again, that's the line to Whittier. All those dead trees there in the foreground are a result of the 1964 earthquake when the ground dropped about 25 feet and brought in all the seawater and basically pickled these trees on spot. They've been that way since 1964. And we do have electricity here. A bit longer train coming off the Whittier branch. This is a 3 max, usually indicates that they got a 7,000 or 8,000 foot train coming off the barge, which means this is the train that will have all the interchange cars as well as all the containers. And they'll fill up this train as much as possible, bring it all to Anchorage, and then sort it out to go north to Fairbanks and or Anchorage. It's one of those views that really shows you how big Alaska is. There's lots of big mountains and tiny trains. We still use cabooses here on some of the trains, the work trains, as well as B&B trains. And so it's still possible to see a few cabooses. We have three cabooses in service. This is a rail train actually headed north along the arm at Bird Point. And this is the Coastal Classic coming into Portage, milepost 64 on the Kenai sub. Those are the Kenai Mountains in the background. And then as it gets a little bit closer, this was this year's train, rather aborted season this year. We didn't actually start service until July 1st. Normally we start around the 10th of May. And then we only ran from July 1st to September 7th. So the previous pandemic year, we had 552,000 passengers. And this year we had about 51,000. So not a good year. This is a southbound train out of Fairbanks up near Denali Park. And although it looks like it is daylight, but it is at night, this is about 12:30 in the evening. So it's the normal time for the freight to arrive here, but still plenty of daylight to grab some photos. A little different view of the frac sand coming out of the Kenai Mountains. It gets pretty green in the winter, or in the summer, as you can see, and then vastly different in the winter. We still have a variety of Jeeps. We have, this is a rail train led by 5 Jeeps. 2 in the classic scheme, the current scheme, 2 in the previous scheme of that, and then 1 in the original scheme. So 3 Jeep 40s and 2 Jeep 38s. And the caboose. That's the Chugach Mountains again. Lots of trees in Alaska. Get plenty of tree tunnels, even though we're in the west. There are many places that's very difficult to see the train. The drone has proved very helpful in that respect. Although if you're nowhere to go, there's plenty of roads to see stuff through the trees. Seen here approaching Bird Point with one of the heritage units, 3003. I like 3003, 3006, and 3001 are all the remaining units, all good numbers as far as I'm concerned, because those correspond to Rio Grande Jeep 30s, which that suits me just fine. A little wider view at the same location. The caboose at the same location. Is this too fast, Nathan? Good.
It works for me. If anybody else has a problem, just send me a chat message and we'll ask Frank to speed up, slow down, whatever works.
All right. This year's version of the Glacier Discovery, it was basically a Jeep, a baggage car, a coach, and then the DMU on the other end. That's a Byron Peak on the left. The line to the right, there's a Y at Portage that forms the branch to Whittier with the main line, and then connects on the south end to the Seward line that continues the rest of the way to Seward. You can see pretty much at this location, you got the tracks, you got the mountains, the tracks, the highway, and just out of the scene on the right is Turnagain Arm. There's not a lot of room. This is a little bit better shot of the big Y there. This is trains coming off the line from Seward, the Coastal Classic passenger train daily between Anchorage and Seward. A track directly behind the motors, that's the connecting track from the line to Seward to the line to Whittier, and then the one on the left of that is the Whittier line that's going to join the main line to Anchorage in just a half mile or so. Another shot along Turnagain Arm. Lots of opportunities. Probably the most photographable section is this line between Anchorage and Portage. because it pretty much the road and the tracks are right next to each other for the entire 50 miles. And there's lots of opportunities like this where you can get the highway out of the scene, but you can also include it if you wanted. The highway's just above there, and you can step down, or you can take it from the guardrail and include the highway. But across there is the Kenai Mountains. Or this is the opposite side before they cross under the highway. That's the Chugach Mountains on this side, and to the right is Turnagain Arm and the highway. So, I mean, these shots are in the Girdwood Valley. There's a little pond right there in the foreground. There's some more of those pickled trees. Same thing here in Girdwood happened, the tsunami and the earth dropping. There's still lots of remnants of houses that have sunk into the ground in this area where you can actually see the houses. They're only 2 or 3 feet off the ground. Another shot of a caboose at Bird Point. This is actually the first location one could get a shot of the Alaska Railroad, milepost 133. It's the first grade crossing that's not on Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. Caboose on the rail train. This is up on the right-hand side there, those little white specks. It's about 7 or 8 Dall sheep that frequent the area.
Oh yeah, way up there.
And again, in the distance there is the Alaska Range, which on a clear day, in the morning especially, look really sharp. And another shot of the rail train there at Brookman. Those are the Kenai Mountains in the distance there. In between the train and the trees, on the other side of the trees is Turnagain Arm, and across is the Kenai Mountains. The only signal bridge on the Alaska Railroad. This is in downtown Anchorage. That's the old freight shed on the left that was turned into retail space. In the distance, you can see another train. I believe that is, I don't remember now. I think it's one of the passenger trains. And on the left of that is the depot, Anchorage downtown depot. In the background is the Alaska Range. This shot was taken at 4 in the morning up near Denali Park on summer solstice, where it pretty much looks like this most of the day. So it's a great time to get out and get some of those nighttime running trains in better conditions than the darkness. Same thing here. This is the same train in Healy Canyon. That's in the Inanna River. This is the most prolific maintenance zone on the railroad. It is a constant battle with the rock slides, and you can see there behind the DP units are going over a bridge that has an area that's prone to slides. Back another 20 cars or so, you can see a culvert there sticking out below the train, and a gash in the mountains there where there's runoff that gets lots of slides. And then the whole canyon's out. You can see it makes an S curve back there, and it's about 15 miles long, and it is very maintenance heavy. This is the old section house of Garner. That little building down there is Garner. In the background is the Alaska Range, and there's a train there. It's about, like I said, about 4 or 4:30 in the morning. The rail train at Indian. Oh, that looks like a beach. You probably would not want to hang out on it. It's very rocky, gravelly, not like many beaches that you'd have in, say, California. Girdwood, a station here to the left. There's a trail that follows the tracks from here all the way down for some 20 miles that makes for easy access. That across the way, there's the Kenai Mountains with Turnagain Arm in between. And of course, the proverbial caboose on the rear. And there's that good look at that pickled forest there. Right-hand side again is the Chugach Mountains, and then Kenai Mountains on the left. One of my favorite ponds there with the Girdwood Valley in the background. Get a nice reflection here. It's really shootable in pretty much all seasons. And the Kenai Mountains and these trains along the south, I said, are very followable. It's easy to, max speed is like 40 miles an hour, so it's easy to jump ahead, get some shots, and follow along. Again, the Kenai Mountains in the background. This is a heavy barge train coming off the Whittier branch around Kern. The highway's just to the right. You can see a car there. But this is probably late spring, still plenty of snow on the mountains. One of my favorite times for photography is in March, because it's still got plenty of snow on the mountains, but there's over 12 hours of daylight, so you got plenty of time to shoot. No passenger trains yet, but still plenty of opportunities. Oh, whoops. Well, perhaps no train, but that's what it looks like at the airport. Very accessible for photography. That's Anchorage in the background. There's a couple of high-rise buildings. Milepost 360, the southbound freight. This is again late in the evening on a summer solstice type of day. Somewhere around the end of June, beginning of July, we can still be up around midnight and get some daylight photos. So just get a little bit of a break between the trees, and the sun's not quite blocked by the mountains just yet. This is up further north of Nenana, around Harding, some roughly 40 miles south of Fairbanks, with the southbound freight. This is probably 11 o'clock at night. Bird Point, the southbound coastal classic. This is one of my first shots in 2008. It still had the former E8 as a HEP car, and it ran with just a Mac and that HEP car. Things have since changed since then, but a very nice classic spot to take photos right off the highway, easy access. This is down at Crown Point with the work train headed north. Moose Pass. This is crossing Trail Lake, Upper Trail Lake from the Lower Trail Lake. It crosses on a trestle there. This is about milepost 28 from Seward, and the tracks are pretty followable from Seward to this point. Once they leave here, they cross the lake, and they're inaccessible from here all the way to Portage, unless you do some serious hiking in some bear-infested woods, but not done that. But this is Alaska transportation here, trains and planes. And of course the caboose on the work train. This is Lower Trail Lake here in the Kenai Mountains. This was a southbound barge train, 2 Max, and all the manifest cars and the remaining containers. This is at Beluga Point. You can't see it, but the water is just to my left. Lots of, there's a part, you can see those little posts there. That's a big parking area. So place to pull off, probably hold 100 cars. And then there's trails across the tracks. There's a little bit of a fairly large section to wander around and take photos. Bird Point in the winter with a export coal train when we still ran those. Unfortunately, those days are over. We no longer have we still run coal trains, but not export coal trains. The coal trains are now on the north end, and there's about 5 power plants up there that still burn coal, and the railroad supplies those power plants with coal year round. This would be an empty coal train returning from Seward. All the export coal trains ran from Usabelli, which is up about milepost 363, down south to Seward, where they're loaded onto a coal ship for export to Chile or Korea, Japan, various locations. They usually ran in a 3 head end, 3 on the rear DP units, and when they returned empty, they all had 6 on the head end. So I can see a bunch of Macs. I'm pretty sure this would be an empty coal train returning north. And that's the Kenai Mountains in the background. This is on Fort Richardson, Chugach Mountains. They're returning Denali Stars about 10 miles from Anchorage. It's not quite 8 o'clock in the evening yet, but as you can see, plenty of daylight. And one nice thing about the passenger trains, they run pretty consistently on a very tight schedule, and they're fairly reliable. And so you can find yourself a location, and usually the train will arrive when you expect it to. This is a returning last barge train out of Whittier, the long Turnagain Arm at the place. This is just south of Indian. So they wrap around the arm there. You can see the tracks are right along the coast the whole way down there, along the inlet, all the way down, along the mountains. And they're coming off the branch there in the fall, off the Whittier branch, some fall colors. Fall starts pretty early here. Usually get your first start of fall colors at the beginning of September, up in the north, up north of, say, Cantwell, and then in Anchorage towards the end of September. And pretty much now the fall color is gone. A work train at Indian. You can see at the remnants of fall, this is most of the leaves are off the tree, but there's still a little bit of color hanging on early in the morning. A little backlighting there. This is the freight north out of Anchorage. This is about Matanuska, some roughly 50 miles from Anchorage. In the summertime, when the train departs around 8 o'clock in the evening after the passenger train arrives, you can usually get a couple hours of good light to take pictures. That's Twin Peaks in the background. Export coal train along Turnagain Arm, pushing some snow. The Turnagain Arm will freeze up at some point, but this probably was late in the season, late snowfall, and probably in into April. Work train. These work trains really are a jack of all trades. They'll dump ballast. They'll move cars around that need to get spotted for the B&B crews. They'll do riprap. They'll handle single car movements if they need to, because it happens to be out of position. So we don't really have any local freights. So the work train would be the closest thing. If we have a car that needs to get spotted, then the work train will take care of it, unless it's right in Anchorage proper. Returning coal train along Turnagain Arm. In this case, there's only 3. It's an empty coal train. In that case, it usually means there's a barge in Seward, and they let the 3 other units stay down there to bring a lumber train north, either later in the day or the next day. Up near Cantwell, the southbound Denali Star. I can tell that this is probably prior to 2012, because the rear cars are tour train cars. They're not all Alaska Railroad cars. And prior to 2012 and prior, the tour train cars ran on the back of Alaska Railroad trains. After 2012, then the tour companies started running their own trains, but with Alaska Railroad power and Alaska Railroad crews.
Hey, Frank, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I was curious, that taller blue car there, is that one of the ones that was maybe built in Colorado?
Yes, that's one of the Gold Star cars, yes.
And probably some of the passenger cruise line cars were built in Colorado, weren't they?
Yeah, those ones on the rear also were probably built by Raider Railcar or whoever.
Then they became Colorado Railcar.
Yeah, Colorado Rail, yeah. So
yep. I meant to ask you sooner, when you had that picture of the self-propelled car. I think it was built in Fort Lupton too, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
And you say there's only one of those?
We only have one. There was a plan to make more because it was in conjunction with the Forest Service.
Right.
And that train, the Glacier Discovery, they run it with Forest Service people on it and take folks into the backcountry where they let them get off and hike between stations, and or there's some cabins out there, Forest Service cabins that they can rent. And there's some glacier hiking and there's some rafting that can be done. It's really a pretty neat system. There's about 6 different stops right now.
Have you got another shot of that self-propelled car?
Probably.
Okay. I remember looking through it before it left Colorado, and I think it had a little snack bar built in because it stops in places, like you said, out in the middle of nowhere. And for those of you watching at home, an unusual feature of that car is it had a gun safe for all the hunters, which I don't think you see in hardly any passenger cars anywhere. So
no, but we still, on the Hurricane turn, the train that runs out of Talkeetna up to Hurricane, it also runs with a gun safe.
Yeah.
In a baggage car.
Sure, because it got a lot of hunters, I'm sure.
Yeah, and you can see anything in those bag cars.
Maybe we shouldn't ask.
Yeah, a lot of skinned animals, let's just say.
Anyway, carry on.
All right. So this is another one of those, it doesn't look like it, but this is another one of those daytime freights. It left Fairbanks around 8 in the morning, or I'm sorry, around 10 in the morning, and it's about 3 o'clock here at Cantwell, and it's just getting dark. And so this is about a 250-mile drive from my house. But there aren't that many opportunities, so I try and take advantage of them when I can. X4 coal train there at Bird Point. And this is a SC-70 Mac. They're sitting out there at the port of Anchorage, which is in downtown Anchorage, with an airline plane that's coming in for landing at Ted Stevens International Airport, and the aurora in the night sky. So even though there's plenty of ambient light, it's still possible to see the aurora. This was the view for a little while outside my office window. This is CP 1140. That's the Chugach Mountain. I'm sorry, that's the Alaska Range in the background with the setting full moon. And the reason for the pink sky is that the sun is rising at the same time the moon is setting. So the signals on the right-hand side are governing the movement out of the Anchorage yard, and the ones on the left are the main line to the Anchorage depot. And then this track here that the tank cars are sitting on is just a little spur track they use to unload different materials. Setting sun there. This is Cook Inlet in the background as the sun sets in the winter. A couple of Macs taking 53 empties to Seward to get loaded with lumber. This is one of the slide zones. This is slide 12.4. You can see there's a slide there, and this was the first train through after they cleared the slide. This is one of the notorious ones here. This is Placer River. In the background is Portage Lake, and to the right, just out of view, is Portage Glacier. And the train is exiting Portage Tunnel, which is about 3/4 of a mile long. And when it exits that tunnel, it crosses Placer Creek, enters Bear Valley, and then enters the tunnel into Whittier, which is about 2.5 miles long. So this is another slide area up around Kern, where a slide has come down, and they've cleaned it up, let the train through. This is at Indian, as they come around the corner there at Indian. That's the Seward Highway, Turnagain Arm, Kenai Mountains. This is Whittier itself. Prince William Sound is the water. That's the cruise line. that we did not see any of this year. And that's one of the cruise trains that have arrived there to unload passengers and or pick up passengers from that cruise ship. The little hotel there is the Inn at Whittier, and a very small town. Only like 500 people live here in the summertime. And then I think it's down to about 150 in the winter. This is a notorious place for not getting a lot of sunshine. They only average 30 days of sunshine a year. And usually, if it's a nice day, the wind is blowing. So it looks nice, but it probably isn't. But they get a lot of snow here, some 600 inches of snow a year. Train bound for Whittier at Kern. They cross the little causeway there between a couple of ponds. The setting sun has gone behind the mountains, but still plenty of light to grab a picture. This is what most of Alaska looks like. Lots of trees. And then houses and or buildings cut in between the trees with a pathway to the building, a driveway, or what have you. This is a military train headed north to Fairbanks, Fort Wainwright, and or probably Fort Wainwright, but they do have some that go occasionally to Eielson Air Force Base. Shot of Bird Point with the spreader. Certainly doesn't look like they need the spreader there, but it's all flat from here to Portage. But once they get to Portage, they'll start climbing that grade, and they'll get up into the Kenai Mountains, and they will really get a lot of snow up there. It's not accessible by road. You can get in there with a train and or through the whistle stop on the Glacier Discovery to do some hiking and stuff back in there. But yeah, it's beautiful. This is down along Kenai Lake, about milepost 18 or so as they approach Seward. This is Kenai Lake, which dumps into the Kenai River, which is world famous for salmon fishing. Lots of people come to Alaska just to fish in this lake. Every year, but this year, they have the state fair in Palmer, and they run passenger trains to the state fair to bring people there. And one of the days, usually the opening weekend, they have a fireworks show. So I was able to catch the park train there with some fireworks. Very similar to what kind of happens down by DUS in Denver. Returning Coastal Classic around milepost 99. I mean, it's really nice. Even in the summer, on the longest days, the sun isn't too terribly high, and so it makes taking pictures, even in the middle of the day, not as harsh as it might be, say, in Colorado or elsewhere. Shot of the Coastal Classic at Brookman. The elevation here helps. You can see the Kenai Mountains and then the Chugach Mountains on the left, and then you can actually see a little bit of Turnagain Arm back there, the water, and you can see the way the tracks go is exactly that way, right around that big curve. And this is the rear DP unit on a returning lumber train north to Anchorage, about milepost 100, and that's the Alaska Range there. And you can see all the lumber is put really on container flats that are all lashed to those container platforms, and that makes it easy to unload them. This is a gravel train coming off the Palmer branch, and that's a passenger train that's going to follow, or after the gravel train comes off, it's going to go on to the Palmer branch as it was an NRHS special. They came and toured the railroad, and they got to see a lot of pretty much every bit of the railroads, from what I understand. They were able to get some of the very obscure branches. They were in the passenger train to the end of the line on Palmer Branch.
Hey, Frank, when was that NRHS special?
I think it was 2013.
And, I know you probably don't want to pat yourself on the back, but tell us about this NRHS bulletin that has a spread of your pictures.
Well, yeah, Jeff Smith, the editor of that magazine, reached out to me at some point, saw my photos somewhere, either Flickr or Rail Pictures, maybe, I don't know. But he asked if I'd be interested in writing an article for them, and so I said yes, and then he said, just run with it. Whatever you come up with, the more the better. So I pretty much detailed the basic history of the Alaska Road and all the little the barge operations, the train operations, the avalanche procedures, the snow procedures, as detailed as I could get. So, and then they graciously threw in a lot of photos, and that's what we got.
And that's the current issue?
That is the current issue, yes.
And tell us how many pages you got.
54.
Oh, is that all? 54. Just a paltry sum. Good on you, sir. Good on you.
Well, it helps when you got some decent pictures.
Yeah, it helps to be there.
So this is the northbound Denali Star up around Broad Pass. That's a fireweed in the summertime. You fireweeds everywhere, and this is really our indication of how the summer is going. In the beginning, the fireweed's real close to the bottom of the stem, and as summer progresses, it works its way all the way up to the top. So this looks to be like about halfway done. So this tells me we're probably somewhere around July, middle of July sometime. And as end of August gets here, that pretty much will turn into what looks like weeds, and the color will be gone, and so will summer. That's Mount Susitna in the background. This is a Whittier Train, about milepost 99, coming off Turnagain Arm where it meets the Cook Inlet, and they all come together right there, and that's western Alaska in the distance. And train will go inland for a few miles and then rejoin Cook Inlet a few miles north. This is a loaded coal train coming south at Cantwell in the fall. There are really some pretty fall colors when you get north. It's about milepost 320. And this is the first passenger train I took a picture of in Anchorage. This is out near Brookman, and this is about 10 o'clock at night of the returning Coastal Classic. I happened to be in Whittier that day, and I came out and I caught up to this train, and I was just amazed that I could still get a picture at 10 o'clock at night. And shortly thereafter, I was living in Alaska. This is at approaching Broad Pass, the summit of the climb between Anchorage and Fairbanks. It's really not much of a climb, but about 1.9%. But it's relatively short, but there's a number of up and downs in between. This is again at summit, the actual summit of Broad Pass, and this is the Denali Star with the old tour cars headed north that eventually will get into Fairbanks. Northbound freight crossing the Matanuska River through the Truss Bridge around milepost 147. That is Twin Peaks in the background. And again, you see they could keep keep the roads in pretty good condition. You can see they're well plowed over there, even though there's plenty of snow hanging around.
Hey, Frank, you talked earlier about just some of the challenges of winter up there. Can you elaborate on a few of those? Fighting deep snow on the south end and brutal cold on the north end.
Right. I mean, Anchorage is pretty temperate in the most part. I've adjusted pretty well, but as a general rule, we don't see the negative temperatures in Anchorage. It can be, we usually get a cold spell at some point in January that can get minus 20 or so for a week. This year happened to last about 2 weeks. But the roads, you get a lot of snow the further north you go. And of course the temperatures, there's some pictures in here that I've taken in minus 40-degree temperatures. And so the further north you go, the colder it gets, and therefore the harder it gets to take pictures, especially in the wintertime, because combined with the lack of daylight and the lack of trains and the sheer amount of travel that you have to do, since most people live in Anchorage, it's often very difficult to come away with what I would call some very good photos. But I put in the effort, and I'm here, so I do what I can. It looks like a lot of photos here, but this is like 10 or 12 years worth of photos. And of course, I got plenty of garbage ones that I just don't show you. So it's very tricky because it's very easy to lose a train. Even though this train here is probably 7,000 feet long, it can get behind a tree and you won't even know it's gone by, because there's several stretches, even along the line down to Whittier, where you don't see the tracks for 2 or 3 miles. So it's always best to find a train and follow it and stay with it, because it's not as bad on the south end, but going north out of Anchorage, like I said, you can't catch a train till the first 20 miles. And after that, then it gets behind trees, it gets away from the road, you can't see it. You can go 30, 40 miles without seeing the tracks. And so here's a train that's coming down the branch to Whittier. That in the distance is Portage. That's the main line that they're curving off of. And the line there to the left is the straight leg of the Y that goes to Seward. And Alaska's full of places just like this, water everywhere. Unless you know for a fact that you're standing on hard ground, I would make sure you have boots on that are up to your knees, because I can't even tell you how many times I stepped on what looked like solid ground only to find myself ankle, knee, or calf deep in water. It is literally everywhere.
And how are those mosquitoes?
They're big, big and frequent, and lots of them. So you just got to learn to deal with them. This is the northbound freight crossing the Knick River. Chugach Mountains in the background. Again, right off the highway, but you could not see this without the drone. So the drone has been very helpful getting these types of shots. You could see this bridge from where the road crosses the highway, but it's considerably further away, and you wouldn't get a view like this. This is a train coming out of Whittier. It's in this is known as Bear Valley. That's the Placer Creek there that they're crossing, and they're entering Portage Tunnel. To the right hand, where you can't see, is the Whittier Tunnel, and that's the tunnel that you enter. It's a road and a rail tunnel. So it's both, they alternate. Traffic into Whittier goes in on the half hour, so 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. It comes out of Whittier on the hour, so 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Trains go in at 20 after or 10 till, and that's how they divide it up. So trains and the road are all in the same tunnel.
That's wild.
This is a train approaching Portage. This is a CN train. This is a coal train crossing Moose Pass, crossing Trail Lake at Moose Pass. This is before they put in the new concrete reinforced girders down there, when it was still mostly wood, which I preferred, but got to have improvements. Yeah. This is Hurricane Gulch. This is the Hurricane Turn over its namesake bridge. This is a good mile hike in through bear-infested woods. So I had a machete, a shotgun, and my camera to get here. But it was one of those views that I just had to have. So. Yep. Coal train along Turnagain Arm with some brilliant blue skies. Yeah, I probably have a number of shots of this train in here because it was one of those kind of days. This is what the barge looks like here. These are the Jeeps that are unloading. They got a handle, which is 3 flat cars. You can see they got that first hopper car back there is coming off the barge. They're unloading that off the barge. Stacked on top on racks are all the containers. And people ship up here, as you can see, RVs, all kinds of stuff. So those containers can stack 3 high, and they can hold up to 300. There is a little bit of deck space behind the rail on the very far end of the barge. So 300 containers and 50 rail cars. And that's Prince William Sound. This is surrounded by mountains here on all sides. Oh, that's a duplicate I have, huh? This is a work train crossing the Hurricane Bridge in the fall. This is probably towards the middle of September. So since it's a work train, they probably have a caboose. So a little bit wider view showing the whole bridge. Yeah, that's the Alaska Range in the background. On a non-cloudy day, it's possible to see just the tip of Denali right here. Aerial view of the water there at Portage. I like the repeating shapes here all the way back. One mountain peak after another all the way back. This is Broad Pass. This is what it looks like as they come north. That's the Talkeetna Mountains on the left. And although you can't see it here, to the right are the Alaska Range, and also Denali is viewable sometimes. Not very often because of the clouds. It creates its own weather patterns, and it's very unusual to actually get a look at the whole peak. This is the other direction from Broad Pass. They built an overpass here. It didn't used to be, but now they have an overpass there. And so this is a shot looking to the north of a southbound Denali Star. The bridge in the background is over the North Fork of the Shulitna River. And the color is pretty nice. Not a lot of different colors, mostly yellows, but there's some orange on occasion. Passenger train entering the branch there to go down to Palmer. The end of this was like right around the end of September, so you can see it's color starting to wane. And I missed it by that much, as they say. The train beat me here by just a couple of seconds. Not a bad shot, but I sure wish the train would have been there. Oh, this one did get a rainbow. This is the train stopped at Denali Park at the station there, and that's the depot at Denali Park, where a fair number of people get off that travel north from Anchorage. Will get off here and spend a number of days hiking in the park and doing a little snow busting and meeting the work train there at Brookman. I've caught two of these heritage units together, and I've caught all three of them together one time. You can see this is a pretty lengthy train. It's all flat, so they can get down there with, especially on the empties, with just two Jeeps. But this is around between Brookman and Bird Point. This is that Rainbow, and you can see they met a little short passenger train there. This is one of the cruise trains that meets in their siding there at Rainbow. It's only like 800 feet long, so freight trains can't meet there, but they can meet the short little passenger trains there. Aerial shot at Brookman of a train headed to Whittier. A little fall shot there. These Jeep 38s are mostly kept in the yard, so to see one leading on a train is kind of rare. So this is that Rainbow. And this is a gravel train coming out at Palmer with the loads. That's Pioneer Peak in the background. And he's going to head down to Anchorage. This is in a year when we were running evening gravel train. So this gravel train goes on duty at 4:30 in the morning, and then the second section started at 16:30 in the afternoon. So it's nice to get some nice evening shots on the branch. Shot of that coal train at Beluga just before the sun cleared the mountains. This is an empty QAP gravel train coming back just about milepost 113, so maybe about a mile and a half from the Anchorage yard, where they'll call it a day. That's Cook Inlet on the right. This is a barge train headed to Whittier, and to the mountains in the background there are the Kenai Mountains, and this is siding of Brookman, although mostly covered in snow, on what looks like a nice day, but it really was brutally cold. So you go into Denali Park, you can see these guys pretty frequently. Bears, you got to be wary of the bears. This was an interesting train. It's a train headed to Whittier, but it's got a Jeep 38, Jeep 40, and a Mack, which is basically all the three versions of power that we have here. We got 52 units, and of those three, we got two power cars, ex-Amtrak F40s, that get used on the passenger trains to provide HEP. This is again at CP 1140 at the setting sun. This is a barge train approaching northbound. Northbound at Bird Point. A rare meet. We don't get that many meets, especially between freight trains. So we have the gravel train here meeting the northbound barge train. So that's the coastal siding they're on. It's about 20,000 feet long, and it's a common place to meet the gravel trains that are headed to South Anchorage to unload, and any train, the passenger trains and or Whittier trains that are coming back north.
It's 4 miles.
Anchorage switcher crossing Ship Creek. They're right at the very south end of Anchorage Yard. Some more busting of snow. And the result after they get down to Girdwood, you see these guys have got a loaded coal train headed south to Seward. And this was an empty headed down. They were doing a test, and they ran with, instead of the normal 70 cars, they ran with 74 to see if they could get it with 4x3. Ultimately, they decided just to keep it 3x3, and they figured the extra 4 cars weren't worth the effort. And I did take a trip down to White Pass to see the White Pass in Yukon when they were opening their line with the steam rotary down there, which was quite the show. And that was in 2011. And gravel train, this is Matanuska Junction. The gravel train shoving back on the branch off of the Matanuska siding onto the branch. It's quite a wiggle there. It's a gigantic Y, and they usually come north and then shove back. Are you leaving? All right. Love you. This is a Christmas train. Engineer Kane, Engineer Carey. Roscoe Road does they call it the holiday train, but they decorate their locomotives in wreaths and Christmas lights, and put some passenger coaches behind it and run it out along the arm. Usually do it 3 weekends in December, 2 trains a day. This is what this would be probably in December, probably like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Sun's about, if we had any sun that day, it's about gone. And this would be probably a morning train. So, and this is at basically about, I don't know, half a mile from my house, and that is Denali in the background there. You can pretty much see it from all over Anchorage. It's about 160 miles away as the crow flies. And this is a passenger train exiting Denali Park in the fall. This is a little bit of a hike, less than a half a mile, but it's well worth it. That's the bridge in the background is Riley Creek, and there's some spectacular views of it elsewhere in Denali Park. But this is a little one that's off the beaten path. Those are the rear DP units on the coal train headed to Seward. Just the last spot you can actually take a picture before they roughly 40 miles when they rejoin the highway in Moose Pass. One of the few locations that I'm aware of where the railroad is actually shorter between Portage and Moose Pass than the highway is. It's actually 15 miles shorter. Crossing Jack Creek at Cantwell, southbound Denali Star. This is at Girdwood, Whittier bound train in the wintertime, pushing some snow. Northbound freight near Clutna. I'm sorry, actually, this is a southbound freight. It is a Clutna, and that's a Knick arm in the background. And coal train at Bird Point. Man, I do miss these trains. And this is about to arrive Seward, an export coal train. It was one of the last ones, so it only ran with a Mack and a Jeep. It probably only had about 35 cars to fill up the last export boat. A gravel train coming around Matanuska as they came off the branch and getting close to Clutna. On the right is Twin Peaks, and on the left there's Pioneer Peak. A spreader crossing North Fork of Shuttle with the Talkeetna Mountains in the background. And there you go. That's plenty of snow. I wrote about this train here in an article for Rail Fenner Railroad, and I pretty much left my house at 7 in the morning and headed north to Broad Pass area here, and got there right as the sun rose around 11 in the morning, and stayed with the train. Had to find it first, and then I got a few shots, and then the sun set around 2, and I went home. Mm-hmm. Now you can see the train never was lit. The sun was out, but it never got high enough above the mountains to actually light the train. So, the mountains look great. And they're plowing, headed towards Cantwell, crossing 4th of July Creek, the Alaska Range in the background. And again, that's around Broad Pass as they depart Broad Pass, headed north. And they're a little bit further up there on Shuttle Creek. A little close up. They plow some snow off the bridge. Yeah, this is they're doing a highway project here right now to straighten out the road a little bit and straighten out the road. In the summertime, it's very prone to accidents because people drive down the road and they just pull off anywhere because of the scenery, and they'll just block the road sometimes. And there's lots of accidents, and you got to be very careful. There are a number of pull-offs that people just don't, like I'm in a pull-off here, a very large pull-off, but if you're not from the area, you don't know the pull-off, and you might see a bear or a moose or tall sheep, and they just stop their car and get out. This is at Portage as they head into the away from the road section where you can't access the rail. This is the Twin Peaks and the returning. This is known as the Aurora. The winter train, they run a winter passenger train all winter long. Goes to Fairbanks on Saturday, comes back from Fairbanks on Sunday. So this is a Sunday afternoon, probably in March, where the sun just starts to swing around enough to be able to light this. Everything else is in shadow except for the nose of the locomotive and the peak. And this is in April, and I can tell it's in April because the snow is dirty. And once we call it breakup here, and once the snow starts to melt and they start plowing with the gravel and stuff, they get down to the bottom and they start throwing all the dirt alongside of the snow. Turns from white to that black, not nearly as photogenic. Busting through some snow there. This is as they approach Portage. This is at the closest grade crossing to my house. You can see those Alaska guys are hardy souls. He's got the window open. Mm-hmm. Going through the high wide detector there at Girdwood. along the arm at between Indian and Bird Point. See that you can see the road up to the right a little bit higher there, but you cannot see the train from up there. And those trees are thick, and especially in the summertime when most people come, they're full of green, and you just cannot see the train. There's this section here. It's about a 5-mile stretch, and you just cannot see the tracks. Now, of course, here they're coming out of the trees, and you can. There's a big parking area in this area as well, so you could get a shot here as well. But they're coming out of the trees. Another little 2 or 3 mile section. This is that milepost 415 area, which is Indiana, basically, as they have about 50 miles from Fairbanks, the winter passenger train. This is the Fairbanks coal train. This is the coal train that they run in the winter. Well, they run it year round, but this happens to be winter. It's about minus 40 degrees. They're headed down to load some coal, and they got that one little hopper car in there, and that's going to go to on the Sontrana branch. It's ammonium nitrate to be delivered to the mine for their explosives that they use in blowing up the coal seams and such. And that's crossing the Tanana River at Nenana. That's the William Harding Memorial Bridge. Just to the right of the train there is where they drove the gold spike, and when the Alaska River was completed. 1914. Yeah. And I snuck in there. There's no train in there. Another view of the coal train as they head down there at Rex highway overpass there. So they got a big pullout, so you can pull off and catch the train there. Nice place to shoot also in the fall because all those are birch trees, so you can get a lot of color here. This is the train on the Sontrana branch crossing the Indiana River. It drops down from Healy at milepost 360 and goes to the where they unload the ammonium nitrate. And there's also the power plant there that Golden Valley Electric Association. They use windmill power, but they also burn a little bit of coal that they get straight from the mine, and they deliver loads of fly ash here that we pick up. The closest thing we have to street running in Alaska is this, the Apu Spur, which is in Anchorage. The tracks run right down the side of First Street, not actually in the street, but headed down. There's a number of industries down here, 4 or 5 industries, feed mill, steel mill, some environmental companies, scrap metal dealer. So yeah, so they go down here pretty frequently, 2 or 3 times a week. Another view out on Alarm. When it gets frozen, you can walk out there and get some different views. In the summertime, it's all mud and it's normally like quicksand, so you don't want to do that in the summer when the tide's out, as you will probably be calling for rescue. A little black and white version. You can see how the railroad just follows the arm along the shoreline just very closely. Even that little dip. I always wondered why that dip was there, but it's right on the shoreline. Shot of the southbound Aurora train at Nenana. This is at sunrise. This is probably about 11 o'clock in the morning. This is what the CN barge looks like. It actually has 2 switches on the deck. 8 tracks, 50 cars, tug assisted from Prince Rupert.
So, hey, Frank, since we're talking about the barges, we had a question via the chat earlier. Somebody just asking where the barges originate from.
The CN barge originates from Prince Rupert, and the ARMS barge, which stands for Alaska Rail Marine, originates in Seattle. So the Seattle barge takes 7 days. They usually leave on Wednesdays and plan to arrive. They usually leave Wednesday night and plan to arrive on Wednesday sometime here. In the wintertime, they're notoriously delayed. Like last week, we had 3 barges all backed up. The one that's arriving will actually arrive tomorrow, so it's actually on time. But we had 2 ARMS barges and a CN barge all arrive last Thursday, and they were a week late. So yeah, they were one was a week late, the CN was a few days late, and the other one was relatively on time. But they do get backed up. But the CN barge takes about 3 days to get from Prince Rupert to Anchorage, or I'm sorry, to Whittier. The gravel trains there right in Anchorage. This is a view from Anchorage Yard. We're right where they park them. Anchorage Yard right there at the parking area where you can park. A couple of Jeeps working the yard and a Mack, probably a set of Macks that are going to go south on the train. This is one of the, this is probably, looks like an Easter train to me. I don't have, the notes aren't here, but this is probably in the spring, and they run an Easter train that they run down to Indian for the customers. Pretty much every holiday they run a train for, except for this year. They run a Halloween train, Christmas train, Easter train, Valentine's train. Try and get as many trains as they can in the winter because there just isn't much else.
Mm-hmm.
So I run with the 2 Macks and then one on the other end just for ease of changing, so that there's no turn. They don't run down to Portage, so there's no turning facilities. And you can see that's the Alaska Range there in the background. A view of the Girdwood Valley, that is Virgin Creek to the right, that's frozen. Back up in the hills there, a couple of miles, there's a beautiful waterfall. Again, this is approaching Indian where the tracks drop below road level. And this is the North Freight at again, boy, it just mixes me up on the air. It's the South Freight at Beach Lake, approaching Anchorage, about 20 miles from Anchorage. This is in Wasilla. This is the Northbound Aurora. This is what the trains look like in the wintertime before they got cut back so much because of lack of passengers and COVID. They generally had 4 or 5 coaches and a baggage car. This is at Nancy Lake. That's a high wide detector at Nancy Lake. That's Denali in the background. There's a number of locations along the railroad. This is a late running freight that got delayed somewhere en route for some reason and got delayed, and was able to see it in daylight. I mean, the railroad runs one crew from milepost 114, which is Anchorage, all the way to milepost 470. 12 hours run. Crews make it almost every day in the 12 hours. But in the wintertime and during the rainy season, when there might be rock slides or something, they oftentimes will run a little bit late and need a dog catch crew. Different view, same location. This is a work train with some air dumps on the head end, approaching Summit, headed to Healy into the canyon to drop all that rock. This is the start of passenger season. This was to be the first train. It's not actually a revenue train, but they're taking all the cars up to Fairbanks. Everything's stored in Anchorage in the wintertime. And then they'll take the, you can see it's kind of built in reverse direction. The baggage car is on, they have one on the end and on each end, and then they got the Gold Star coaches. And so they'll arrange it in Fairbanks for the first southbound in the next couple of days after this. A lumber train coming out of Seward. This is approaching Girdwood. This is Nenana, which is very interesting because that's a gigantic horseshoe curve. You can see the train wrapped around that 180-degree curve, and as it continues on to the left, that's the Tanana River in the background, and Tanana River makes a 90-degree turn, and then the railroad crosses it on that bridge where they hammered the gold spike. And so it's very interesting because then the railroad will come down in the direction the train is heading right along the Tanana River, and then make a 180-degree turn the other direction so they can continue going south towards Anchorage. The railroad is dying to be able to fix this, but it's probably not in the budget in the near future. They have plans to show them fixing it, but it's, I'm sure, millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions. So frac train out of Seward. They've been doing more and more of this lately in containers. A little bit easier to unload instead of the super sacks, but it does vary depending on where they get the frac sand from. Milepost 147 crossing the Matanuska River. This is on Sundays and Mondays. The railroad is heavy with trailers going north to Fairbanks because all the ships, I mean, all the goods come into Anchorage via the barge, via containers from, and then, or row ships, roll on, roll off ships out of Seattle, Tacoma. They have Tote and Matson, Horizon Matson, have row ships that come into Anchorage, and they'll row these big old 53-foot containers, or I'm sorry, trailers, off of the ships and dray them over to the Alaska Railroad. Well, we'll take our piggybackers and put them on flat cars and take them north. So on Sundays and Tuesdays, we can get anywhere from 75 to 120 trailers going north. Brookbend along Turnagain Arm there, headed for Whittier. Yeah, I mean, the weather patterns are such that you just never know what you're going to get. Even a cloudy day can yield a gem like this one if you're out. As these guys were visiting from the lower 48. One's from Kansas, one's from Oregon, one from New Jersey. This is one of the passenger trains that coming off the Palmer branch at Milepost 1. That would be for the state fair. 4 Jeeps headed down to Whittier. This is at 20 Mile. This is the other end of Portage Tunnel where they exit a tunnel and cross the bridge headed into Whittier. This is the closest shot I can get to my house, which is as the drone flies, it's probably 1,000 feet. But this is not a drone shot, but it's probably, if I have to drive here, it's about 1/4 mile. And so that was a train coming up from Seward with lumber, and then this is the passenger train right behind it. And then their view. So you can see we got plenty of mountains. Water, mountains, snow. Looks like we have trains, but it's deceiving. On a good day in the summertime, when full passenger trains are running full tilt, you could probably get 12 to 15 trains. In the wintertime, you can probably go a week and maybe see 1 or 2. So this is the southbound freight out of Fairbanks in the summertime at about a location known as Esther. This is at Rainbow, headed north towards Anchorage. This is one of the cruise trains that comes out of Seward. Big cruise ships come into Seward, and they'll unload the passengers right onto these cruise trains, and they'll take them either 1 or 2 directions. They either go up to the airport because they're ending their cruise in Alaska, or they'll go to Denali Park because they're going to continue their stay in Alaska. Unfortunately, a lot of people get off the cruise boat onto this cruise train and then go straight to the airport. And the only section of Alaska they see is this section between Seward and Anchorage, which is beautiful, but they don't really get to see much of the northern part. Gravel train, empty gravel train. Again, one of my favorite locomotives. Looks good with the color. This is the northbound Denali Star about 3 or 4 miles out of Fairbanks, arriving Fairbanks basically, at a place called Happy, which I'm guessing based on the way they built the road, they were named it that because they were really happy to get to Fairbanks. That's the Parks Highway on the very far left. That's the Nenana River between, and the northbound Denali Star at Cascade. And this is Garner. This is not a drone picture. You could drive to this spot right here. If you know the right dirt roads to get on. A work train there. And that's a place called Windy. That's them entering into the Healy Canyon. This train's exiting Healy Canyon, but looking back along the train, you're actually entering that maintenance-prone area of Healy Canyon. And a little bit further along as they head towards Denali Park, a few miles outside of the park. The empty coal train as they get close to Usabelli, which is where they load them at. Another view there at Standard. Passenger train at Broad Pass. That white coach on the end is a Western Explorer car. That's another cruise line that we still pull their cars on the rear of the train occasionally. This is my first year in Alaska. They still ran the RDCs on the Hurricane Turn, as well as the trains to Palmer Fairgrounds for the state fair.
Well, there's some units.
This is at milepost 105. Milepost 100 as they approach southern Anchorage. Just departing Girdwood. This is one of the fall foliage trips we ran a few years ago when they run some fall trips, pasture train. Normal pasture season ends around the middle of September. This was a train running at the end of September, so take advantage of the fall colors. This is around Kern. This is at Girdwood, the Glacier Discovery. You can see the F-40s on the rear. Now they have the DMU car there instead, but the Mack and the power car. This is milepost 75. It's at Brookman. Had a big avalanche here, covered the road and the highway and into Turnagain Arm. And as they were cleaning it up, another avalanche came down and it buried Department of Transportation and some of the Alaska Railroad workers. They're able to save everybody except for one, which was Kerry Brookman, which this is the siding named after him. But prior to this, it was known as Bird. And this is at Indian, northbound arms train. It's at Peterson, empty coal train. I think we may have shown that one already. This is a drone shot of the Hurricane Bridge from the other side. This one, they let me off the train, and they'll let anybody off here actually. So you can get off before they cross the bridge. You can take the trees are pretty much grown up here now, and you can't really take a regular shot, but you can definitely use a drone here. They stay on that bridge for about 15 minutes, so it gives you enough time to get out, take some photos. When the train comes back, they'll pick you up. So this is the Hurricane Turn. It runs between Talkeetna and this location here, which is about 60 miles. And they'll drop you off anywhere. It's a flag stop train. They'll drop you off and pick you up anywhere you want. Lots of fishing, hiking, hunting in this area. The Denali Star at Denali Park. Conductor King, or Engineer King, with a rainbow there. Now to the Rio Grande. That's the end of my Alaska stuff.
Hey, Frank,
Yes.
would you mind if we do some Q&A here about the Alaska stuff before we move on too much?
Sure.
I've seen a number of questions come by in the channel.
Okay,
and,
yeah, no problem.
That way folks who have other things they need to go do can drop off but not miss the questions and answer. All right, so let's see. What have we got here? Wally asks, just read that the president signed an okay to have a direct rail connection with Canada. Is there any news on that from your end?
The Alaska Road is fully in support of that, and they also went along with that and signed a agreement with A2A, which is Alberta to Alaska. That's the entity behind it, and they've signed an agreement to work with them to try and help develop all that stuff. And so they're definitely behind it, and they want that to happen. They think it's a good thing. But if you read my article in that NRHS, you can see that this is not the first time it's been proposed. It goes back a number of years, 40 or 50 years. This has been proposed a number of times, and so far has been unsuccessful. This time though, it seems to be a little bit better funded, but yeah, the railroad would love to see it, and they're definitely behind it, and they are definitely moving forward with environmental studies and things like that.
Andrew asked, is the Anchorage to Seward train still running? And given the second part of that is dome car, I'm guessing he's talking about the passenger service, not the freights.
No, the Anchorage to Seward passenger trains are no longer running. They stopped on the 7th of September this year. Normally they go to about the middle of the month. They are still running freight down there. We will get some barges down there. We're getting ready to run one this week sometime, this week or beginning of next week. They're very sporadic, but they're not nearly as consistent as the barges to Whittier.
And then John asked,
sorry, this is Andrew.
Sorry.
The question I had is, I rode that train quite a few years ago. It was in the summer, and it had the dome car on it that I saw on the Hurricane Turn. So do they use that dome car when it's running in the summer?
Yes, they do. They still, the Alaska Road has 5 or 6 of those dome cars. Yes, and they usually have 2 or 3, depending on. That's the most heavily traveled train consistently, because it's great for day trips. It needs to get 700 or 800 passengers a train, and so depending on how many are on the train, will determine how many of those dome coaches they put on there. I've seen as many as 3.
John asked about the railroad and seismic activity. I mean, certainly there was the 64 earthquake that did a phenomenal amount of damage, but how do you guys protect yourself against earthquakes, and how frequently do they cause damage?
Well, we had a big one a couple of years ago. It was 7.2, and it created a lot of damage. And I'm from Southern California originally. I've been through a lot of earthquakes, but not one like the one I experienced here. It was something else. It lasted about 4 minutes, and it was, it was unnerving. And then we had multiple aftershocks after that. It created quite a bit of damage on the railroad, a number of places where some of the embankment sloughed off into the water or alongside the railroad, and so they had to do a lot of repairs. The railroad was able to get the track back up and running in just a couple of days with some. They ran 3 work trains around the clock, and then they had flow orders through the damaged area. But there was some track damage from as far as Portage, which is 50 miles to the south, to as far north as Willow, which is about, let's see here, Willow's at 185, so about 70 miles north. So, and they estimated it was millions of dollars. No equipment damage or anything like that, but we feel earthquakes fairly frequently, and the road has a protocol of what has to happen when there's an earthquake above a certain magnitude, and depending on where it's centered exactly. But for a long time after that big one, we had numerous aftershocks per day. I haven't felt one in a few days, knock on wood.
Ron was asking about the 64 earthquake. Obviously before your time, but given your knowledge of the history, anything you want to add about its impacts to the railroad? And
yeah, it was,
how much?
9.4, and it wiped out trackage all the way from Anchorage all the way down to Seward, and then it created a tsunami and wiped out about 6 or 8 miles of track down there. They rebuilt most of it except for the southern 3 miles of the line, which they abandoned, and now the yard is 3 miles north of the original location. The depot did get restored, and it's in its original location. So if you visit Seward, you can see where the tracks used to be, and you can find remnants and such, but they're no longer there. They lost, I don't know, several hundred freight cars to the tsunami, and lots of damage was felt as far north as Denali Park. Millions and millions of dollars worth of damage.
And then
something I would not want to experience.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would want to experience that. Denny was asking about the gravel trains, and where do they come from, and where does all the gravel go?
Well, everything here is boggy. So if you want to build something, you got to put gravel down. So the gravel's used in road construction and in building. So the gravel comes from currently from 2 locations: Palmer, which is on the Palmer branch, which is about 50 or 60 miles away, and they load 86-car trains up there. That gravel train, which is Alaska Sand and Gravel, they're currently still running. They usually run until freeze up, and they're still running right now. Saturday will be their last day. They're still running. They'll run from Anchorage. They leave at 4:30 in the morning, head out to Palmer, load their 86 cars, usually get done about 10 or 10:30, head to South Anchorage where they dump, and then get back to Anchorage by 4:30. So that's this year. They've been just running 1 train 6 days a week. The other one is QAP, and it's Quality Asphalt Paving. They load at Cashwitna, which is at milepost 195. So they're about 80 miles north of Anchorage. And so they'll run a train of 86 cars from Anchorage they come on duty at 8 in the morning, run out to Cashwitna, load their train up there. They have a little bit faster loading system, so they can load their train quicker. And they make it down to South Anchorage and dump their train and get back. They usually have to get dog caught, so they don't usually make it in 12 hours, but pretty close. Usually the crew, usually they send a yard crew out there to get them, and they usually get back around 20:30 or so. So not too bad.
John was just thanking you. Wonderful show. Do you actually work for the railroad? And
I do.
I'll let you take that one.
Yep, I do work for the railroad. I've worked in a number of positions. Currently a dispatcher working for the railroad. I've been hired on in April of 2011. And I've been here ever since. And so probably will finish out a few more years here and then return to Colorado.
Say, Frank, is there no lumber mills there? It sounds like they bring it all in.
They do bring it all in, yes. Wow. There might be some, they do some logging and stuff, and there's some small, but nothing real big. But yeah, so they bring all the lumber in. It comes in on those SBS barges. They usually do two or three in the winter barges into Seward, and then they also you'll see some lumber and stuff come in on the arms barges that come in. There's one other barge that comes in that does not have rail access. It's the Northland Barge, which is also owned by Alaska Rail Marine now. It comes in from Tacoma, and it's a 9-day barge, and it's for people that aren't as time sensitive to get there. And it comes right into the port of Anchorage, and they do unload the containers right onto rail cars if they're going north to Fairbanks. But most of the stuff is bound for Anchorage. I'd say you probably get 10 or 15 containers a week that go north to Fairbanks off of that barge. But everything comes in here via ship, unless it's small, in which case it comes in on FedEx or UPS jets. But this comes in via the arms barge out of Seattle, comes in on the CN barge out of Prince Rupert. Then you have the Northland barge out of Seattle, Tacoma. And then you have the tote row ship, which comes out of Seattle, Tacoma. Then you have the Matson Horizon. It's actually a container ship. It comes out of Seattle as well. And those come in twice a week. Those Matson, Matson and tote come in on Sundays and Tuesdays. So everything comes into Anchorage that way, or into Alaska. There are some things that get trucked up, but yeah, via the Alaska-Canada highway, but not that much.
All right, since I'm falling behind on the chat window, everybody, I've given you the ability to unmute yourself. I'd ask please use it courteously, and you can just ask your questions directly.
Let me
So, go ahead, Ron.
Oh, it's Wally. What I'd like to ask is, we rode years ago, and we got on at Anchorage on a car on the end of the train. When we went back 2 years ago, we were told that the train started at Denali. When they unloaded Denali, they turned and head south, and had something to do with crew utilization. Is that true?
Well, what it is you got on one of the cruise company trains.
Yes.
They don't go all the way to Fairbanks. You got on like a Holland America or a Princess. You got on one of their trains. So we run the trains for them with our crews and our locomotives using their cars, but they only run from Anchorage to Denali Park. And then they unload all the passengers at Denali Park, and then they go to Healy, where they turn on the Y at Healy, and then they stay there overnight where the crew rests, and then come back the next day to head south. Those are daily trains, but yeah, they don't go to Fairbanks. So that's why if you got on an Alaska Railroad train, you would be able to go all the way to Fairbanks.
Well, we were told, I asked one of the crews, and they said there was a utilization of equipment and people, that you go into Fairbanks just stretch it too far.
No, well, maybe for the Holland America or those guys, because they don't have that many passengers that go that far, would be my guess, but not for the Alaska Railroad. Because before they took those trains over, we ran them all the way to Fairbanks. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
My question is, down here in the lower 48, so to speak, there's ATCS where you can monitor train locations, so you can go out and take pictures mobile. Is there a way to do that with a laptop up there?
There is not. We have very little CTC anyway. Although we're fully PTC, so I don't know how that, but we only have CTC from milepost 105 to milepost 195. That's it. And so from milepost 105 down to Seward, it's all track warrant, except for a little section at Portage, CP F120. It's just that Y, that giant Y there. That's CTC, so CTC Island. And then going north from Cashwitna, which is milepost 195, the rest of the way to Fairbanks is all track warrants as well, except for at Hurricane, where they have an island of CTC for the hurricane sighting. So that's maybe 2 miles of CTC there. Other than that, there's not a lot of CTC. So most of it's track warrant.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very, very wonderful pictures. I mean, I'm jealous of what you've got there. That's some great stuff.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a labor of love, as they say.
Do you wait for a particular sun angle? Because you seem to be getting a lot of, I don't know if it's early morning or very late in the evening sun.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a general rule, I mean, you're going to get better sun at those times, but the sun angles aren't nearly as harsh here in Alaska in the spring. Even in the summer, they're not as bad. But yeah, I mean, the freight trains in the summertime tend to run early in the morning to avoid the passenger trains. And the freight between Anchorage and Fairbanks run at night. And so in the summertime, that's still daylight. And so you do have the low sun angle. So it really does accentuate everything and make things look better. And then the passenger trains, you know, because I live in Anchorage, I tend to catch them on the end of their run and not nearly as much in the middle of the run unless I'm going north, which I do frequently, but not nearly as much as I would. You know, if I want to catch a train, I need to, you know, go somewhere and do something. My choices are kind of limited. So, you know, in the summertime, I can decide to spend all day out, which I do. But if I just want to catch a train, my options are limited. I usually catch a train at the end of their run or the beginning of their run, which tends to be in the morning and the afternoon, in the evenings. So that certainly helps. And the passenger trains run on a good schedule. So, you know, those are all published and you know where they're at and they're pretty reliable.
I'm going to have to sign off. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to next time and seeing some Rio Grande.
All right.
All right. Well,
good night, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Ron. Any other questions, Wally?
No, it's the pictures are fantastic. We've made several trips back a few years ago and up till recently, and we've seen a lot of the areas that were in tonight's pictures, but not from those elevations. Just an absolutely outstanding set of pictures.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, given that this is virtual, it's not like you all have to drive home. So for those who would like to stick around for Frank's Rio Grande stuff, I mean, you've seen the quality of his photography, so you can guess what's coming. But Frank, any idea how long this plans to run, just so we can give folks some idea?
Probably 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I tried to, I think you guys wanted to stay like around an hour long total, right? That's kind of what I was shooting for.
And we're at 2 now, but it's okay. Like I said, it's virtual. It's not like we have to drive home. Yeah.
No wonder I'm confused.
That's a nice thing.
You're just taking that time change thing way too seriously.
I know. I just looked at my watch and thinking, like, oh, we're an hour in.
Well, we're on mountain time. Yeah.
Yes,
Let's show us some Rio Grande, Frank.
Yeah. Right, show us some Rio Grande, Frank. Take it away.
My favorite Rio Grande shot of solitude here. You know, I lived in Colorado Springs. I made a number of trips out to Utah. Nathan can attest to that, as we often saw each other at the same locations many times. So this happens to be one of my favorite shots there. I grew up in Southern California, and even in the early 80s and stuff, I made numerous trips from my Southern California home to see the Rio Grande, which was a 9-hour drive away for me. So these are just some of my favorites. So this is that solitude. Some trio of Rio Grande Jeep 30s at Provo, probably the Midvale or the Tintic Local, one or the other. This would have been probably in the mid 80s. And then, you know, more frequently there at Palmer Lake, when in the 2000s, you could get fairly frequent Rio Grande, still ran on the UP trains. So always loved this. And then another mid 80s shot of a coal train there at Springville as they head east on the Rio Grande in Utah. And then a Rio Grande train on the North Fork branch at Austin. This is what was symboled at the time, the GJLOC, Grand Junction Local Coal, and they just kind of went out and spotted hoppers at the various mines like Terror Creek and those type places, and so they're running the horseshoe there at Austin. Rio Grande train at Bridgeport on the Montrose branch. This would have been probably the late 90s here. And another train there at Austin. That SP unit is 5399, still Rio Grande, but although I'm a fan of the SP, I did not like them to be painted gray and red. And one of my trips in the early 90s, I caught the SD70 demos on the Craig branch. This is at Crater with the dynamometer car and the 3 SD70Ms. And you can see them going around the loop there at Crater. And one of my trips out there, this is at Cumbres, one of the C&TS trips. Hard to go wrong on a narrow gauge. And a train with an SP leader there at Pando, one of my favorite locations on the railroad. And of course, can't forget the helpers. I do miss that. And then at Price, shot of a BNSZT at Price, Sperry rail car there. Out there near Thompson. This is a 5371 leading this train long before she was famous. Still with a caboose there. At Toland, Infrequently, I saw BN on the Rio Grande trains. This was probably in the early 90s. Out there west of Green River. Book Cliffs. Hard to take a bad picture out there. This is the Montrose local coming back from Montrose at Rubidoux on the North Fork Montrose line. There's that shot, and then the wider shot here. This is when they went up and back in the same day. They don't do that any longer. Down one day, back the next. And the going away shot. So coal train coming off the Sunnyside branch is about ready to cross under Highway 6 near Banning, Utah. And a train there at Jukes Tree, double-headed, lettered for Rio Grande. I love those trips. And this is the Craig Shuttle when they ran coal between Axial and the Craig branch and the Ute power plant on the Ute Spur out of Craig. They ran back and forth. This is in the late 90s, 99, 2000. They still had 3 Rio Grande tunnel motors and a Rio Grande caboose. Of course, helpers there at Palmer Lake. In the good old days. This was probably in the early 80s. This was also in the early, probably 1983 or so, my first trip to Colorado. This is in Pueblo. A couple of Jeep 30s drilling the yard there. Nice Rio Grande boxcar first out. Coming out of Billy's Mountain and eastbound at basically Thistle. Same train, just a little bit closer to there. This is a train on Soldier Summit coming approaching Colton. And up at Cayune, westbound auto rack train. Getting ready to go through the double horseshoe there. And of course, the tunnel motors that called Helper home. Oh, I was always excited to get here. Coal train approaching Palmer Lake. And then the SC-70s on Tennessee Pass at Pando. Coal train coming off at the Craig branch at Sydney after they met an empty. And this is at Palisades or somewhere around there. Cameo maybe of a Z train when they still had Rio Grande power in the late 90s. So this is when I was experimenting with in-camera double exposures. Took a shot of the moon there at Colorado Springs at the Colorado Springs switcher. And that's my result. And this is what it really looked like. So that's not too bad in of itself, but helper power there. Back when they're starting to integrate some SP and UP into the mix. Light helpers at Cayune. More light helpers at Provo. They sent a 6-pack of tunnel motors from Helper down to Provo to help a heavy eastbound train. A dirt train there at Banning as they head out on the Sunnyside branch. The Montrose local there at Rubidoux before they get to Delta. Dirt train approaching East Carbon. This is the South local at Sedalia. And the Montrose local going around the tracks at Delta as they come in to make a switch there at the grain facility. Coming off the branch at Mounds. Dirt train getting on the main line. The Rio Grande empty coal train at Hotchkiss on the North Fork branch. Dirt train out there at Banning. in Red Canyon there, or Manifest. And this is probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's still fairly frequent. You could see Rio Grande power, which is why I went out here so often. Although this doesn't have ditch lights, this is probably more like the 80s. 5371, leading the train there at Dotsero under the cutoff. A train there at Colorado Springs approaching Woodman. Another shot of the dirt train back. As they got closer and closer to the end, they really tried to keep that power working. I saw normally it was 3 units, and then there was 4, and then I saw 5. They really tried to, those train master there and Kurt Jensen there and helper really tried to keep all those tunnel motors working so UP wouldn't pull them out of there. He did a really good job. This sent this light power east to go get a train at Grassy. Then this is not on the Rio Grande. This is crossing the Maumee River in Ohio near Toledo on the Wheeling, where they got a number of Rio Grande engines there. I have this particular was 2 of the Rio Grande, 5413 and 5391 lead this Coke train up towards Detroit. And here they are the next day coming back after emptying the train at Halleck, which is north of Toledo on the right where they cross the Ann Arbor. There's a tower here. And these are pretty much in really good condition. There's a small WE right above the numbers there. They just keep these in really good shape. 3003 switching that scrap dealer there off of Oxford on the joint line. And then there's them coming out at Prospect and the LMX at Renix over there when they were coming. And then Montrose local there met a coal load as they passed each other there at Ruby Doo. And then a meet at Range between 3 Grands on the M train with meeting the UP on the Z train. And there, as they curve around, coming through Hotchkiss, the coal train, empty coal. That's the CV local at Maxwell. They ran out on the CV spur, and there's a lumber yard out there, and they got chips out there, wood chips, and filled up those cars. And that's the M train headed east, Grassy or Woodside, somewhere like that. And it's not a great shot, but I have very fond memories of this shot. This is my first trip into Denver in 1983, and this is the ski train that came in. We saw the Zephyr that day, and then the ski train. And then a few days later, we rode the Zephyr to Salt Lake. Well, rode it to Grand Junction and back. And then a few days later, we rode it to Salt Lake. And then maybe 3 or 4 days after that, there was a mudslide at Thistle. So I consider myself very lucky. SD7 there, somewhere in Denver. I don't really recognize the location. Too long ago. Maybe the north end of North Yard, maybe? Or West End, I guess. I'm not sure. Approaching the siding there at Bridgeport. They're going to meet a UP load there. Montrose local in Montrose when they still had tons of wood chips. This was fun to watch them switch here. You know, same here at, I think this is probably Olathe or maybe Delta. Had to throw in a ski train shot there. Those look so good in good light. Couple of SP trains there on the Energy Spur at Energy, getting ready to go east at some point. Then in the South Draw, loaded coal train there. And then at Wash, that's when after the Rio Grandes, they put SPs on the Z trains, which I guess that was better than the UPs. And coal train there at Bond. I did like the SPACs, and then this is at Grassy The BNSF doing a good Rio Grande impersonation, at least with the orange, and the Book Cliffs doing their thing. Crossing one of the creeks there at Ruby Doo. Steel train at Joliet to Pittsburgh, coil steel train at range on the cutoff. Denver Union Station, Christmas Glory. Fall Glory on the Cumbres. The circus train. So we were headed to the airport in Salt Lake. We left Helper driving. Caught this train at Gululi to backtrack here to Summit. They sent those helpers light west, and they got on the head end, luckily, and pulled that train to the east. So they took a few shots before we had to hightail it to the airport. That was way in days before all the security. You could get there last minute, still get on the plane. SP, when they were in the mix, you never know what might show up on the train. This is at the SAG on the joint line. Coming out of, boy, I always mix these. I think this is probably the Nolan tunnel. A brand new ST50. One of my favorite trains came off. This train came off the Craig branch this way. Super cool. Eastbound, or yeah, westbound out of Billy's Mountain on Thistle. SD9 doing its thing at Prospect. This would have been 83 for sure. Probably mid 80s with a coal train along coming out of Spanish Fork Canyon. Heavily powered manifest at Provo. This is all changed now. Up there at the upper loop of Gululi. This is, boy, drawing a blank here. Gululi maybe on one of the, don't remember. Southbound at Palmer Lake. And Tennessee Pass there near Minhern. And another one on Tennessee Pass. Near Detour. Bumblebee up there at Los Animas area. Going across the, I think this was a charter if I remember right. That was fun. Yeah, very. There's like 50 people packed onto this little ledge right here. Helper when it was fantastic and had 10 or 12 Rio Grande tunnel motors. I think there's 7 here. Great views. This was a great place to take pictures at Helper. I miss this tremendously. Ski train at Rocky. This would have been 83. Southbound, getting ready to leave North Yard in 83. Another train at Pando, then a westbound. This is on Soldier Summit somewhere, but oh, it's at Gululi. Switching the candy factory there in Montrose. I don't think they service this anymore. I took a train out east and got them out. This is in Paola, Kansas, when Rio Grande got the extension to Kansas City. I did a little photography out there. I think this is on the Mopac. This is in Kanoki Yard with the KCS. 2 Jeep 30s and a Jeep 40. There, it was amazing. And then a Smurf with KCS. A South Local at Sedalia. Probably early 2000s. Ski train with the Jeep 60s. Another shot of the, I think that might be a duplicate. Oh, that was Pando, and there's the helpers. I did catch the UP on one of the rock trains out on the Royal Gorge line. This is coming into Pueblo. I think they repeated this recently, as I recall. I remember seeing pictures out near Parkdale. This is a Ute generating station on the Ute Spur. This is at Mill Fork on Soldier Summit, headed west. That's the caboose that was out there. It's pristine on the outside. I'm not sure what it looked like on the inside, but these guys they had the caboose because they did a long backup move on the Ute Spur to the generating station there. The Spring Glen, M train. Another shot of the dirt train approaching East Carbon. That's it. Like SD 45 there. I think this is Toma on the joint line. This is on the Energy Spur. This is probably one of the greatest days of my life. I got the cab ride on that train from the Ute generating station to Energy. We loaded the train, and then the train master at Pittsburgh picked me up, brought me back to my car, which I had left at Adams Junction after he took me to Ute to begin with. Got back in my car and then drove back so I could catch him in the daylight. The cab ride was all overnight, but it was fantastic. And another shot on, I guess that'd be east of Minner. Same here. Sure do miss Tennessee Pass. Mm-hmm. Palmer Lake. Coltrane. Between Colton and Cayenne. Empty coal train. This is another one of those kind of, I picked up this train in Provo and I followed it all the way to West Elk. Cayenne. Out near Sphinx. My ride on the Zephyr in 1983. Coal train, that same coal train at Soldier Summit. I followed this train, like I said, from Provo all the way to West Elk. Ex Rio Grande leading at Palisade. Rocky local at Rocky. Coming out of Tunnel 1 with the Good Power leading. This was at, I guess, approaching a Lobato.
Yeah, must be.
This was an excursion with a triple header.
Nice.
Yeah, this was a good fall day.
Mm-hmm.
Castilla in the Soldier Summit line. Inside the plant there at Brax. This must be the South Local. Another Z train there out near Cameo or Tunnel Aiken, the Beck Canyon area. The westbound M train at Cayenne. Chemspur had quite a hump in that track with a West Local. This is another this was in Father's Day 2002, and the UP sent this train, the MDVPU or MNYPU, whatever it was called, sent it south with 6 Rio Grande units. Headed for the cutoff. M train. This is the Montrose Local there at Bridgeport. This is on the spur that cuts off there off of Issaquah, goes down to Blakeland through that auto. There's a lumber yard down there, and then there's this auto salvage place. Quite entertaining there. Rocky Local there at Rocky. Colorado Springs Local, Colorado Springs. Switching the lumber plant there. on the X-Rock Island. Pikes Peak in the background, coming on the Old Rock Island under Nevada. At Maxwell on the Soldier Summit line. Work train between Cayenne and Colton. This is that same train that's now in the North Fork branch at Whitewater. Meet there in Spanish Fork Canyon, heavily powered westbound. Westbound a detour. This is out near Antonito on the little line that served the little scoria plant there. Helpers at Cayenne. That same 6 unit, that's 5 tunnel motors and an SD50 here at Greenland. CV local coming out of the north or the west helper yard or east helper yard. That was the dirt train crew, very friendly guys. They saw lots of people. They're very friendly, very kind, very willing to help out where they could. One of the summer ski trains, or I think this was a Winter Park Jazz Festival or something like that. Up there near Colton, the Manifest. Tunnel motor and Jeep 60 there at Castilla. Oh no, that was at Cayenne. Oh no, Kaluli, and this one's at Castilla here. That's all late 90s, early 2000s. Coming out of Tunnel 1 with the summer version of the ski train. Coming in towards Helper. At Wash. Out near Thompson. Everybody knows that spot. Colorado Springs local there at Colorado Springs. Train headed to Axel, that Ute shuttle. This is approaching Palmer Lake, the 6 units on Father's Day. And I think that's the last one. Yep. That's
fantastic
all.
stuff. Fantastic stuff, Frank. Thanks for sharing with us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Frank. Those are wonderful. Railroad and finished little Rio Grande, marvelous stuff.
Yeah, Rio Grande's far and away my favorite, but it's gone, so I had to pick a new favorite.
Yeah.
You really can't go wrong with the Alaska either.
No, I'm not complaining, mind you, but yeah, I would gladly take the Rio Grande back in a heartbeat.
Right. Well, thanks for staying up late for us, Frank.
It's late for you guys. It's early for me.
Rub it in.
That's true.
It's not even 8 yet for me.
Frank, you're obviously a mountain lover.
I do, yes.
And you have your show was not only beautiful photography, but you showed a real feeling for the country.
Thank you. I try and capture the best parts if possible.
You shared a very valuable insight with us.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I appreciate that.
It was wonderful. Good to see you, John, from way down under.
Yes, thank you. This is a great thing. I'm just crossing my fingers that you're going to keep zooming.
We're trying to figure that out. Yeah,
We got a couple more times for sure. So
yes,
we're going to see if
what they call hybrid meetings is what is the way.
We're going to try. Hopefully, there's a good Wi-Fi at the meeting hall where we usually meet. We still have to figure that out since they've been closed for so long. So.
Oh yes.
But
anyway,
to be continued. Yes, film at 11, or we will let you know when we know, something like that.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity very much.
Well, thanks for gracing us with your pictures. And,
Thanks so much, Frank. Just
Yeah.
awesome.
if you dig up some
time.
more, we'll invite you back.
Yeah.
I in my this is probably I think there was about if I remember correctly, there was total pictures was about 420. And so there's about 260 Alaska and the rest were the Rio Grande. But
Wow.
in my Flickr folder on the Alaska, I have like about 800 photos in there. So I showed you some of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Marvelous evening. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, we hope to see everybody come back for the second Tuesday in November, which will be the 10th. And that will be
Our next
our
meeting.
Union Pacific month. And we'll see what we learned from Mr. Dickens in Cheyenne.
That should be a good one.
Yeah.
Typically, if we were live, he would have show and tell. He'd have a whole table full of stuff, odds and parts to show us. But I imagine he'll have some good pictures. And he's always got a good story.
There's no doubt.
He told me, I think I mentioned it earlier. He said they dug about 20 tons of dirt out of the turntable pit this summer and worked on some tracks around there. They've got some odds and ends of railroad equipment that's been sitting around. I think they're maybe trying to clean up some of that and get rid of the pieces that aren't worth restoring. And as he said, it's been 30 years since they painted the outside of the roundhouse, so it was probably due. So anyway.
Actually, just a quick question, last minute question about what are dirt trains actually?
Oh,
tell me.
go ahead. Well, the dirt trains, they had dirty dirt that they took up to the landfill at East Carbon, but later on it kind of evolved into Salt Lake garbage as well, and they took that to the landfill. So it's a combination of the Salt Lake City area garbage as well as some dirty dirt that they reclaimed from various spots along the line. They took out to the landfill at East Carbon. Originally, it was just started with the dirt, so everybody just kept that name, the dirt train.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
Dirty dirt was polluted. That wasn't necessarily radioactive, was it?
No,
Maybe
not necessarily radioactive, but
low level radioactive, possibly. Yeah. They had to move a lot of that type of stuff out from the Moab branch, I know too.
yeah, the radioactive side, they're still moving it out there.
Yeah.
So
All those lovely things we have here in the West. I suppose Australia.
I do miss it. I do miss it.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, shall we call it a night?
Cheers.
All tonight.
cheers. Thank you so much.
Everybody, see you next month.
Thank you again, Frank. See everyone in November for Ed Dickens from UP Steam.
All right. Thanks again. Good night.
Good night.
Night.